advising vaccine manufacturers to update their booster shots to target the Omicron variant, which the CDC says now makes up more than half of all cases in the country. Joining us is Dr. Scott Gottlieb. He's the former FDA commissioner, a CNBC contributor, and he also serves on the boards of Pfizer and Illumina. Scott, it's great to see you. We are seeing an increase in COVID spiking, it seems, ahead of this weekend. I don't know what you think next week's going to look like. Before we even get to the booster issue, what do you tell families to do, not to do? How do you even think about this? Because you also now have so many people who've had it and then others who haven't, and it's sort of hard to figure out how to think about it.
Well, look, the risk has definitely come down in terms of just prevalence being lower all around the country, and especially for people who've been recently boosted. I think they're reasonably well protected. And a lot of people have had this Omicron infection as well. They're recently recovered and going to have a high degree of protection from subsequent infection. In places where B4 and B5 are spreading right now, they're spreading primarily in a population that has been vaccinated. They're also able to pierce the immunity that people have acquired from prior B1 infections. So that includes parts of the Southwest, Southern California, like San Diego, and the Pacific Northwest. Those are the places we're seeing the highest incidence of B4 and B5. So those are going to continue to spread. They're spreading primarily in people who already have some pre-existing immunity, and they seem to be able to pierce the immunity acquired from B1. For people with a recently recovered B2 infection, they do appear to have better immunity against B4 and B5. And in fact, the countries that had big waves of B2, like South Africa, haven't seen big waves of B4, B5. In the Northeast, where we are right now, cases are going up. So if you look at New York, New Jersey, Connecticut over the last 14 days, cases are up about 5 to 10%, but they're up off a low baseline, and prevalence is largely low in the Northeast,
right,
the Mid-Atlantic, places that had big B2 waves.
For folks who've had it in the past couple of months, how much time do you think that they really have? Meaning, I think there's a view that if you've had it, maybe you have 2 or 3 months, 4 months, do you? Or does it really depend on which variant you had? And a lot of people don't know which variant they had.
Yeah, look, it depends on which variant you have, but I think if you recently recovered from an Omicron infection, you can have a reasonable degree of confidence that you have several months of immunity. The immunity is not as durable from this infection as it was from prior variants. So people, for example, who were infected with Delta seem to have a more durable immunity than people who've been infected with Omicron. And also, as you noted, people who were infected with the B1 variant, so people who were infected early on in the course of this Omicron wave, they probably had B1. They seem to be less well protected against B4, B5. It does appear that B4, B5, which is the variant that's now spreading in parts of the country and people believe will become epidemic by the fall, that evolved from B2.
Right. So let's talk about the vaccine, and let's talk about the vaccine come fall, because what we all want is a vaccine that would protect us effectively against infection if possible. The vaccine, as far as I understand, is based on B1, B2, not B4, B5. Therefore, what type of protection do you think people will really have?
Well, look, the vaccines are going to be reformulated now. So the direction from CDC and from FDA, for that matter, to the vaccine manufacturers does appear to be that they want the manufacturers to reformulate a new vaccine based on B4, even though the manufacturers have prepped a vaccine, a bivalent vaccine that was based on the old ancestral strain and a combination of B1, on the presumption that that newer vaccine based on B4 is going to protect better against B4, B5 heading into the fall. Recency does matter, so we need to ask the question whether or not we're going to be too late with these reformulated B4-based vaccines to really get ahead of the wave of B4 that we're likely to see in the late summer in the South and probably early fall in the rest of the country. The old vaccine does provide some protection against B4 based on our assumptions, not as good. Probably the bivalent vaccine would have been better, and hopefully a B4-based vaccine will be even superior to that. But recency matters, and if you're, for example, a 75-year-old and it's August and you're 6 or 7 months out from your last booster, what do you do? Do you wait until October or November until you can get the B4 vaccine, or do you go out and get a booster of the wild type? I think they need to provide guidance to that individual, because you don't want that individual heading into a wave of infection in this fall without any opportunity to get boosted ahead of a big wave of infection.
The conundrum is going to be, which booster do you take, and do you wait for this newer booster, which you're suggesting is going to take a little bit more time to manufacture?
That's right. If we would have gone with the bivalent vaccine based on B1, it would have been available by the late summer. We would have been able to get people boosted ahead of this wave. Now, if we're going to wait for a B4-based vaccine, it might be incrementally more protective against B4 and B5, but we're going to have to wait longer. And in some parts of the country, B4 will already have swept through those regions. So, you know, we're trying to balance a careful balancing here right now.
Right.
Where you want to get the most effective vaccine into people, but we also know recency matters, and being recently boosted, even with the old vaccine, and certainly with the bivalent vaccine based on B1, would afford a higher degree of protection heading into a B4 wave.
Realistically,
so people will have to wait now.
Realistically, when do you believe that the vaccine will be available? You're saying October, November, and how is that going to get divvied up? Meaning, is it going to be by age group again? Well, how do you think that works?
Well, look, so the manufacturers have said that they can have a vaccine available by early October, late October. So assuming that you have a vaccine available by early October, even if it's authorized quickly and distributed, we know that, you know, vaccines don't make their way into the supply chain on day one. Not everyone could go and get vaccinated on day one. So rolling out that vaccine campaign, that's going to evolve over the month of October and November. My concern is that B4 will have swept through many parts of the country by then, certainly the Southwest, where it's already epidemic, and probably parts of the South as well. It'll have swept through. So a lot of people probably will have to face this B4 wave without the benefit of that vaccine. So by delaying it, yes, we probably will acquire a vaccine that's incrementally more protective against B4, B5, but it probably won't be in time for many parts of the country, or at least some parts of the country.
How protective will it be, do you think?
Well, certainly more protective than the existing vaccine. It's not going to restore 90% protection against infection. I think, you know, we're sort of imputing from evidence in test tubes right now, but there's a good reason to believe it's going to be more protective against the B1-based vaccine and certainly the existing vaccine. But it's not going to restore the protection that we had from the original vaccine against that original strain, the 90% protection against infection.
We got to get back to 90, Scott. We do. We got to work on it. Meantime, we got to jump. Have a great weekend, Scott. Appreciate your guidance on all of this.
All right, coming up, retailer Kohl's, we've been talking about it, saying